Hello, good evening. My name is Julian Rosser, and I'm the head of Hub Cymru Africa. So, welcome to this discussion this evening. People are just dribbling in at the moment, but I think what we can do is go to the first slide. I can start doing some introductions to what we'll be doing through this event, and then start talking about the speakers. So we are recording this event because we want to make it available to other people who will be interested in the issues to access on YouTube later. We do understand that attendance at an event like this could be quite sensitive to people depending on where you are in the world. There could be some legal hazard to you being identified as attending this event. So do please feel free to not put your real name on screen to keep your screen blank as well, and we can find ways of ensuring that you can engage with the event anonymously if you're at all concerned about that. If you are worried about anything that happens and you would like us to delete content from any video that is shared, then please do get in touch with us, and we can talk to you about sorting that out as well. If you have any technical issues during the event, then please do pop a note in the chat and we'll be monitoring that, and we can do what we can to help. We really do want people to participate in conversation this evening, but what we will be doing is mainly for the first chunk of the discussion, I'll be leading a discussion with the speakers. If you've got any questions, you can put them in chat. And I will see if I can weave them into conversation with speakers as we progress. There will be a section for people to ask questions and make comments after all the speakers have had a good turn at discussion. So we will be inviting people to participate at that point. I've mentioned the chat function. It would be great if people could ask questions. If you are happy to say who you are and where you're from, then it would be great if you could put that information in chat as well. But of course, you may not wish to. And behaviour needs to be clear that this needs to be a safe space for minoritized people. And if there is any bullying, any problematic behaviour, then we will be very quick to eject people from the conversation. We don't want to do that, but we would like to make sure that everybody is respected and that lived experiences are respected within this conversation. If you do have a safeguarding concern or you wish to raise a complaint about something, then you can send an email to me. I'm actually the safeguarding lead for Hub Cymru Africa, or you can pop my email address into the chat. But my email address is julianrosser@hubcymruafrica.wales. And on timekeeping, we've got the agenda coming up in a moment, and I'm not entirely sure what permission to interrupt is. What I think permission to interrupt is probably, again, if you put something in chat and ask if you've got something really significant to say. Ori, do you have any views on that?
So permission to interrupt is if you're giving a contribution and it's going past the time, we're asking for your permission so we can interrupt you and tell you to keep the time.
Okay, thank you. That sounds like a good plan. All right, so let's move on to the agenda. So we're in welcome and opening remarks. So I will, introduce the discussion structure, outline key focus points, and talk and present the panelists to the audience. So I will do that. I will be introducing the individual panelists in a moment. Then we'll do some audience Q&A, and we'll have time for some closing reflections from the panelists and some conclusions by Hub Cymru Africa. So I'll give you some opening thoughts for why we're having this conversation. And Hub Cymru Africa has been involved several years in supporting the LGBT plus community in Africa. We first started working a few years ago, particularly when there was new laws being proposed in Uganda that were particularly discriminatory against LGBT plus people. And so many of the Wales Africa partnerships and community links that exist are with Uganda, that it was of particular concern to the community in Wales. And we work to train Welsh organisations, give them an idea on things they can do to show solidarity, to protect their staff and to protect their partners. And we have published some useful information on that, which is available on our website, or you can talk to any member of the team about how to access that. But there is actually a diversity of experience of LGBT plus people from across Africa. And what we've seen is that there's lots of progress being made. There are lots of wonderful things happening, people coming together to demand their rights to express themselves. And there are areas of progress, but we've also seen that there are areas of regression, and that there are campaigns and governments in various parts of Africa intent on removing rights from LGBT plus people, and we're very concerned about all of that. But what we wanted to do is to bring people together from around Africa and from Wales, so that we can not only learn about what the situation is, but we can also do what we can to stand in solidarity globally with our brothers and sisters, and indeed non-binary siblings from across Africa. So we'll be ending very much with a focus on not just what's happening, but on what we can do together to make the situation better. So I think we are there. If anybody's got any questions at this stage, then please do note them. I thank you for, we've got a couple of people starting in chat already, but what I will do is just to introduce our speakers. Though I will ask first, Ori, do we have Kim?
Not here yet.
No, okay. All right, fab. Well, we'll see if Kim arrives. So we will start with Alpha. And Alpha is an economist, intersectional feminist, and a founder and CEO of a Kenyan community-based organization which advances queer economic empowerment, creative expression, and safe spaces. Alpha leads initiatives such as a queer vocational college, a community shelter, and Below Cloud 97, a gender-neutral fashion brand. We will also be hearing from Omar van Reenen, and Omar is the co-founder of Equal Namibia, which is Namibia's largest civil rights movement since independence. Their advocacy was instrumental in the 2023 Supreme Court victory, recognizing same-sex marriages conducted abroad, and in the 2024 High Court victory, decriminalising apartheid-era sodomy laws. And we also have Friedel Dauzub. Friedel's a Namibian gay rights activist who made history by challenging and overturning colonial-era laws that criminalised same-sex relations. In a landmark victory at Namibia's High Court, Friedel successfully argued that the laws penalising sodomy and unnatural sexual offences were unconstitutional and discriminatory against gay men. So, thank you. I think we can take the screen sharing off now. What I'd like to do is go to each of our speakers in turn and get some reflections, first of all, on what the experience is like as an LGBT person in the countries in which they're living. Then I'll move on to ask them more about the things that they are doing, the activism that they're undertaking, and what's being done to address that situation. I'd like to talk about what their hopes for the future are, and then I'll open it up for more audience participation, and also to talk about what it is that we can do to show solidarity. So I think if we start looking at my screen, if we can start with Friedel, and it would be really good, Friedel, to get your reflections on what experience is like in Namibia.
Thank you. Thank you so much to have Cymru Africa for creating this space. And welcome to all the audiences. In Namibia particularly, when I was thinking about preparing myself for this speech, I had to locate myself in history. And I think it would be important to say, first of all, that Namibia is now 30 years post-apartheid as a country. And so we are sort of dealing with a very new constitution and a new constitutional order in Namibia, which our constitution really is a great tool for us as activists because there is non-discrimination, there is equality, and all kinds of principles and values that we rely on. On the other hand, as you said in your introduction, we still had a sodomy law until 2024, and we still had an Unnatural Sexual Offences Act until 2024. This has now been declared invalid and unconstitutional due to the challenge that I brought to the High Court, but it's on appeal, so we are waiting for a Supreme Court appearance sometime this year or next year. But to go a little bit further, in terms of work, in terms of family, in terms of marriage, there are still discriminatory apartheid and colonial laws that we inherited and that we need to get rid of as a country. True equality really is not there for Namibian LGBT people. And that is coupled with social attitudes, especially an unholy marriage, I would say, between what's happening with the far right-wing movements in the US and in the West, as well as our own evangelical religious, I would like to say pseudo-religious, really, crowd here in Namibia, including our leaders, that would sort of take what Trump and the Proud Boys are saying and put it in an African and make an African version of it. I'll stop there for now, unless I'm not sure how much time I have. But the situation really is that there is progress in the
Yep.
on the legal side of things in terms of litigation. But there is still a struggle in terms of social attitudes, in terms of funding and resourcing the movement, in terms of crime and safety and security. We had 7 people killed, murdered. They are not being trialed. The perpetrators are not being trialed as have committed a hate crime. They are being trialed as normal murders. And so we still don't have a hate crimes law or a legal system. And so I think you can see the kind of struggle. While on pen and paper, it may look great that we've sort of removed the sodomy law or that foreign partners can be domesticated in Namibia under same-sex marriage. The situation is actually quite worrisome when you sort of look at the LGBT Namibian person and what needs to be done in order to decolonize properly and ensure that we remove all the vestiges of colonial law, as well as the social, religious, moral code that has been imprinted on our society.
Thank you very much. I think as we're in Namibia, it would be worth going to Omar next to ask. I imagine that you work together, don't you? So your perspective might be quite similar, but it would be really good to get your perspective on what's going on.
Yes, absolutely. I think one thing I'm grateful for is to still be, in a generation where I get to walk in the footsteps of Friedel and do work that's built off of many of the queer activists that have come before me who've laid the groundwork, such as Friedel. But seldom times do, folks get to say that their freedom fighters are still in the movement and in the work while they're still part of it, and that they get to stand on their shoulders while doing it collectively. So I guess I'm grateful to be an activist in this time and with many folks like Friedel that have laid the groundwork before me. Friedel, I'll echo most of what Friedel has said. I will also say that I'm part of what's called the born-free generation. And that is Namibians who were born after 1990, born after apartheid, and were raised under the promise of freedom and equality, and who has had a recent president, our late president, Hage Geingob, who wrote the Constitution. And when they had the Constituent Assembly, President Geingob said that Namibia's Constitution was written as human rights as its foundation and bedrock. So imagine you grow up queer with this story of Namibia fighting against these oppressive, white supremacist apartheid regime to build a country where everybody's free and equal, and that you are now part of this born-free generation. But that promise of liberation didn't extend to queer persons. And that's what I felt growing up, this story that's built on this fantasy that we are now this equal country. But why is that story being told that the moment when I walk outside and, proudly express my love, just as other Namibians do, is that promise then taken away from me? Then how born free am I if I'm still chained to the shackles of colonial era sodomy laws that were imported to Namibia, laws that were never written by a democratically elected Namibian parliament? So until recently, with brave folks like Friedel, who have taken who have taken the challenge to challenge this sodomy and colonial era laws, we are still criminalized for our, same-sex love and intimacy, even though many of us grew up believing that independence meant dignity for everyone. But now we see that independence meant dignity and free love for everyone but. And, my mother grew up in a generation and a time where she couldn't love who she wanted to just because of the color of her skin. So how far have we come if the very people who have liberated us have now become the oppressors themselves? The oppressed have become the oppressors. So what's striking is how ordinary Namibians have moved also ahead of our leaders. I don't want to paint a picture that, it's all of Namibians that are against us. In fact, an Afrobarometer study and data has shown that Namibia ranks among the most tolerant countries in Africa. In fact, if not the fourth or fifth most tolerant, with more than 54% of our population who are welcoming and tolerant of their LGBTQ neighbors. That puts us high up there amongst countries like South Africa, Cape Verde, Mauritius, and Botswana, I believe. Or most of whom has also decriminalized their sodomy era laws. So we are amongst the most tolerant when it comes to attitudes towards people in same-sex relationships or LGBTQ persons. In one survey, Namibia was also reported as being fairly understanding that people's identities, including queer identities, should not be grounds of discrimination. Why? Because we still know the horrors of what discrimination looks and feels like coming out of apartheid. So, people saying that they wouldn't mind having LGBTQ neighbors, even though they know same-sex acts are criminalized because of these apartheid-era sodomy law, and it's so sad then knowing that the Namibian people know what discrimination looks like, but then having politicians and religious extremist forces continue to fight against our reform. And this contradiction, a population that's more open than its laws and politicians, is a lived reality of many queer persons, especially queer youth as well, because we are seeing this hypocrisy. We are seeing political parties and politicians claiming to be the liberation movement strip away our rights. Let's not forget that 2 years ago, only 2 years ago, the political party in power who have freed us from apartheid are the very same party that has passed Namibia's most draconian and anti-LGBTQ laws. So how can you call yourself liberation fighters if you are now oppressing people? So we grew up hearing these messages of freedom and equality, and we hear politicians weaponizing fear and criminalization against us. And that tension shapes not only our identity, but also our activism. And we are fighting for a Namibia that truly lives up to its constitutional promise of dignity and inclusion for all. And I'll end off by saying it is queer people, it is queer activists, it is our feminist allies and many civil society organizations and your ordinary allies and queer persons in Namibia that are holding a mirror up to this country and its politicians to actually show them what being liberators are, because being a liberation and fighting for independence and equality didn't stop in 1990. It is a continuous generational effort, right? And it is our generational task, especially as queer persons, to take up the baton from the 90s and continue that fight for equality. It is us that are testing the limits of equality in our constitution. And it is us that's going to continue to keep up that fight for generations to come. But also, it shows that democracy for queer, not just for Namibian queer youth, for queer African people across this country, defending democracy is not just a choice, but a necessity for all of us, because the parameters of democracy will allow us to realize dignity. If you look at Southern Africa, because we are able to challenge these cases in courts and decriminalize, that is our only slither of hope. And even though we have these anti-LGBTQ laws that are being swung into place, at least we have the independence of the courts and our constitution to help safeguard us. But for how long? And across Africa, these lived realities are very different. Our lived experience in Namibia is so different from those in Kenya, from those in West Africa. And that's why we understand that our fight is a collective fight. And our fight in Namibia is not only ours, but it is for our queer siblings across the continent as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. There's a lot that you've both said to pick up on and come back. And I'd be particularly interested to ask you a little bit more about those differences between public opinion and political representation, and also the trends that you're seeing in demographics of who is hostile, who is friendly. But I would really love to. We need to also get some thoughts from Kenya, and hopefully Alpha is with us and can chime in a bit. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, fantastic to see you.
Thank you so much.
I hope you can, give us a perspective from Kenya on what's life like there for LGBT plus people.
Thank you so much again for those who joined. My name is Androgynous Alpha, and I'm based here in Kenya. I think our experience is similar to Omar in Namibia, but Namibia is more progressive than in Kenya. But right now, as you're aware that next year we are going to have election. So now the politician, the government now are our friends. But mostly in Kenya, a lot of hates come from social media, like cyberbullying, and also like some areas, maybe like in the downtown, you can experience like kind of violence. And there's also cases around homelessness where like parents discover you're queer and then you're being evicted. So there's the issue of family value, because Kenya is more of a family country. When even our president speaks about Kenya being a family and also God-fearing country. So when it comes to now saying that we are family, now the parents are like, why are you dressing like a man, and are you gay? And also like Kenya uses a lot of social media, as you see like the trip of Aisho Spring, is that there's a lot of Kenyans like viewing their media. So with that, we find that the parents actually like, when they're scrolling, they come around with their TikTok, they're like, oh, so you're gay. So you get a lot of people getting evicted, and now you're like, where should I go? And when it comes to workplaces, in Kenya, there's no like gender inclusive policies around workplaces. So you find that if I go wearing the way I'm wearing, I cannot get the job, because already they have this stereotype that I'm queer. So they see me as a queer person, not as my expertise. So also there's cases of cases of unemployment among the queer people, most of the queer youth which I work with. When it comes to sports, They don't understand that you can be masked and play football. This is they don't understand issue around intersex person. So you find people being discriminated even in the field. Again, the issue like trickle on all aspect of the queer person in Kenya. In Kenya, it's more like the more you have financial independence, is like you're buying your own security. So it depends. Any level of your life you get to, is like you get more safe. Even like using like public transport, you find that you can get attacked or harassed by the men thinking like, why you dressed like this? Or you're going to take our girlfriend, you're taking our wives. And I can give an example of as a fashion creative, we did a video, it went viral, and it has 2.4 million viewers. And when you go, the men are saying that, oh, you people experience periods. So it's like they're using like menstrual health as a weapon. Say, oh, you're pretending to be men, and then we're like, we're just wearing clothes. And these like targeted 8 comments, like they get to you, and then you're like, your mental health. And again, mental health is very expensive, and then you don't have the work. So it's like a cycle of looking at how the Kenya how the Kenya family values work around. Remember last year we had the family value conference in Kenya. Why would even like our us host like a family value in Kenya? So for us in Kenya, it's also like depending on the area you are, and also it's like a trend. We were supposed to have repeal hearing last year, but they pushed it in February. So we don't know February what's going to happen, because it's supposed to happen in February. So it's more of we anticipate, we hope that the Kenyans this time they are more like not going to talk about queer people, because mostly have been saying that the queer people fund the demonstration, queer people do this. It's like we're used as a scapegoat around any issue coming in Kenya. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that. It would be really good, Alpha, though, just to get a little bit of a sense of how you feel things are moving. Are some things getting better? Are some things getting worse? Or is it a bit of both?
I think I'm going to share the report done by the Human Rights Commission on the cases reported last year, like harassment, violence reported for the community. But what I can say is that Kenya, like they acknowledge that there's the queer people, they acknowledge that there's the masculine presenting people in the country, but they always have issue when it comes gay men. Like there's a lot of issue and stereotypes around gay men, like why would you as a man choose this kind of thing? But also like us being free, like I can go to a club with my girlfriend, kiss my girlfriend, a gay man can kiss another gay man. But remember, it depends on the location where you are doing this. I can say that Kenya is progressive, like it's working toward like being free. In a way that you remember the president during the renewal of Soji in Geneva, we voted yes. During the renewal of the SOGI with the disability, we voted yes as Kenyan, meaning that the government actually understand that the queer community exists, but they don't want to say it publicly that we support and also like acknowledge that there's queer people in Kenya. So the government is that when the interests align with them, they can support us, but on boardroom, not saying, oh, we understand there's queer people. No, but in boardroom, you can have a conversation with them. They're like, okay, we are going to support you, but we can't say this out there. Another thing is the language. So when it comes to language around queer people, is that the government always wants us to use the key population. They say that don't use queer people or LGBTQI, but use the terms like key population. So you find if they're getting any funding is that they use key population. The government has partnered with a queer organization in Kenya. But again, it's all about the language. Make sure that you use key population when saying the queer people. But also like intersex people being like recognized in Kenya. Also, it's also showing that there's a progress here in Kenya. So for me, I can say that we are moving a step forward. I don't know if those like politicians who don't think, they take us like a step back. So as I'm hoping like as the election comes, because now they want us to be their friends, they can like we can keep on like saying that the queer rights matter and protection of human rights, everyone deserves it. Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. It would be really good, Friedel at first, and then Omar, to get a little bit of a sense of how you see that playing out politically in Namibia, and what are, as I said, it's very interesting to get a sense of the differences between public opinion and where the politicians are and where the government is. Friedel, do you have any thoughts on on that.
Thank you. Thanks for diving deeper into that. So I will start with the post-domicile win discussion in Parliament. Hopefully that will show where the public is, where the politicians are, and where the courts are in these three the tripartite way in which we try and do our advocacy here in Namibia. And so what after the domicile win in court, what we had is that we had a politician, his name was Jerry Ekanjo. I believe he's sort of really coming from very, very conservative parts of the ruling party. He started then regurgitating in Parliament, disrupting any session in Parliament, using very profane language in Parliament, and introduced what he called laws that sort of would set aside the Supreme Court decision on domicile. During that debate, a lot of language was used, accusing the LGBT community of being Satanists, of being pedophiles, the usual tropes that get used in the LGBT community. Soon after that, we saw 7 heinous murders of LGBT people. And there were very loud social media voices that were activated as a result of this parliamentary debate. What was really, really disheartening is that because it's a parliamentary debate, we cannot take these politicians to court because they have immunity in parliament to say whatever they want. But they are able to form and do social imprinting. And what we have seen is a rise in hate crimes, but also a rise in social media homophobic comments. And what we've also seen at the same time is a reverberating silence from our traditional allies. And so people who would usually speak up for LGBT rights or for human rights or for the separation of powers fell silent. That support is still being shown quietly, but it is not being verbalized. You don't see many of them writing in newspapers to show support, to show our democratic values, our constitutional values. And so we are really in a place where we know that the ruling party is homophobic. We know that the president, the new woman president that we've just elected, is silent on the issue of rights, but also silent on the constitutional separation of powers, and does not rein in the members of a party in parliament. And we know that several of the current ministers have been very vocal opponents of LGBT rights. At the same time, in terms of what we do normally is organize our communities on the ground. We know that with the new US government, there are no longer resources to organize. So we also know that many of the European countries who've been giving us money as part of what I call a colonial model of development aid are reducing what they can give to Africa, and specifically what they can give to the question of reproductive rights and sexual orientation and sexuality in general. And so now we are sort of in a rock and a hard place where we are facing an extraordinarily supported, even by the West and by the Trump government, but also by Western rhetoric. In the UK, you have the transgender question, and it sort of creates this global, and we already know what Russia and China's sentiments are. And so we all have now got almost like a consensus of these very powerful countries with which our governments feel that they are in tune when they trample on LGBT rights, coupled with that, no funding, no ability to organize. And we are sort of really thinking about going back to the pre-funding ways in which we organize in communities, speaking to each other. But for many, the funding is really needed, especially for those of us who are living with HIV, who are gay, lesbian, transgender, and who need to be able to walk into clinics and hospitals and other public spaces to get proper treatment, but also to be dealt with in a dignified way.
Thank you, Friedel. That's yes, that sounds, tough. A lot of things going on. There's a lot of things to come back on there, but I notice I'm very happy that Kim has been able to join us. So I'd like to go to Kim. Kim, are you still with us and able to turn your camera on, hopefully, and speak? Hooray!
Hi.
Fantastic. Hello
Hi.
there, Kim.
How are you?
Could I give a quick introduction, and then I've just asked all the four speakers to start with some reflections on what life is like for an LGBT plus person in the countries in which you're living, from your lived experience and from people that you're working with as well. So if you've got a moment to think about that while I read out your introduction, if that's good with you. So Kim Eve Merari is a proud trans woman from Nigeria whose journey blends creativity, courage, and advocacy. Kim is a chef, a model, a content creator, and an activist who uses her voice to push for visibility and acceptance of the LGBTQ plus community in Nigeria. So welcome, Kim. I'm really glad that you could join us. It would be really good just to get some reflections from you on what is it like being a trans woman in Nigeria, and what reflections do you have on the broader state of the LGBT plus community in Nigeria?
Okay. It is a very tricky and scary life for trans people living in Nigeria. It is more difficult to navigate or just exist, because a lot of the times, people are just out to harm us or to not understand us or to not even listen to us or to think we're crazy people. So it is very difficult for trans women out here. But the good thing is we are very determined people. We know what we want. And so we hold on. I see a lot of people hold on to that. They believe that this is who they are. And, whether it's life or death, they will leave it till the last call. But for the community in general, there are a lot of people striving and living out freely here. It's just that it's illegal, but still, people are determined to be seen, to express themselves honestly. So there are a lot of hindrances and things made in places that are difficult for us to access or to be 100% ourselves. But aside that, there is a lot of hope. People are taking the risk to just be themselves. So that is important, I think.
What sort of we've had a little bit, a few reflections on the difference between the legal situation and public opinion, and that obviously in that fight for acceptance and liberation, then there are things that you can do to change the law. But if your neighbours, if your family are still very hostile, then things can be different. That can be very difficult, whatever the law says. And what sort of reflections do you have on the difference between public opinion and the legal situation in Nigeria, or potentially in different parts of Nigeria?
The reflection, I mean, it is right now. It is the reflections are, I would say, wow, that would be. It's a very tricky question, but I think there is a lot of harm both in just everywhere. Everyone is listening to what the government has to say. So there is a lot of harm. So there is no, like, the reflection is mostly personal, if I make sense. I don't know.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you. Omar, be great to come to you at this point. What have you got to say?
Yes, and just to piggyback off of the previous question that was also thrown to Friedel, and I think it can also add to Kim's response as well. First, I also just want to mention about the aid that's been received from the global north. Firstly, I don't see this as developmental and humanitarian aid necessarily. I think it's reparations, because these laws are imports from British colonialism, from Western colonialism, Dutch colonialism, German colonialism, European colonialism, all in all. The funding that LGBTQ organizations get is minuscule. Governments are funding various projects, and LGBTQ organizations get a drop in the bucket of developmental and humanitarian aid. So what we previously got, before everybody jumped on the bandwagon of the US aid cuts, which wasn't only US aid, funding was reduced from various governments, especially European governments that had right-wing coalitions. That's minuscule, but those were reparations, because we are left to undo the harms caused that these colonial era laws have placed on us. It's up to civil society to now do the work to find ways to repeal these laws. So that is a form of reparations for us to do the work to build better democracies, right? And then what Friedel also mentioned about politicians that came to draft anti-LGBTQ bills in response to us winning court cases. This was also due to the fact that, and you can also see this happening in Ghana with, I think the guy's name is Sam, that championed the anti-LGBTQ bills. I'm not sure. I stand under correction. But these politicians that write these anti-LGBTQ bills have nothing to offer the populace. They don't have answers to the bread and butter issues, to the poverty that we are facing, to the gender-based violence that we are facing, to the fact that a vast majority of us are living in informal settlements, in shacks, that kids need to walk to school, to schools in Africa, that kids don't get fed at schools, that there is an enormous amount of sexual assault, especially on minors, that are perpetrated by uncles, dads, pastors. They don't have policy solutions to this. So what they do is they stir up culture wars, because they are in office for more than 30 years and cannot go around campaigning on, we fought for independence, so vote for us, because that story is getting old. So now they need to go around saying, vote for us because we will stop homosexuality. So they have nothing to offer, and they go around stirring up culture wars. Particularly this specific person called Jerry Kanjo, he was pressed and sad that he wasn't chosen to be the party president. So what he did was fall back on cheap campaign points, which is to weaponize LGBTQ rights, right? So unfortunately, queer people across Africa, particularly in more vulnerable socio-political situations like Kenya, Ghana, and Nigeria, are becoming collateral to these politicians that have nothing to offer us. Then, just two more very quick points. This is, besides this being a culture wars, we are kind of testing, Africans have spent decades under oppression, from slavery, from religious oppression too, that has changed our African cultures, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to question religion, but if you look at African cultures and traditions, queer people were celebrated. We were revered. We were a part and parcel of societies. There were same-sex marriages, and trans people were our healers and whatnot before colonialism, right? Now, if you have a populace that has suffered slavery, being taken to boats shipped across continents, then you've had wars and apartheid and decades of that, fueled by religion changing your culture. Then you have queer existence, right? And now they are telling us that we as queer people are not African, right? So for Africans who have spent decades under all these oppressive systems and have had to assimilate to a foreign religion, now you are telling them all of a sudden, okay, accept these queer people, which this religion says should not exist, right? It's a lot. It's a lot of decolonization that they themselves have to do. And when they do that, it causes them to also question Islam and Christianity that was also imposed on them. And I'm not saying that queer people and these religions are not compatible, because these religions at its core is supposed to teach love, but they are being, this religion was used to teach hate and is currently used to teach hate right now, right? So the future that I envision is that it's queer people actually that are going to bring people closer to the love of their religion, and that will help realize what true African culture is. Because look no further than queer existence in Africa to see what true African culture is. Because African culture is not family values. African culture is not a nuclear family. African culture is community. We don't, as Africans, we don't think of family values as the Western concepts. We think of community. We think of Ubuntu, and queer people embody and portray that as well. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thanks, Emma. That was great. So we're kind of moving to a time that I'd really like to start gathering questions, and it would be good if people could pop, if you've got a question to ask or would like to say something, put a note in chat, and I will keep an eye on that, because I really would like to get a brief sense, and I'm very aware of time. Everything has been so fascinating. We've got a really good sense, I think, from Namibia of some of the things that you've been doing, and that you've been doing as civil society. And there's clearly there's been a very strong focus on legal action and using the power of the courts and the constitution to claim rights, or not to claim rights, to assert your rights. I'd like to come back to Alpha and ask a bit about what the situation is like in Kenya and the things that that LGBT plus people have been doing in Kenya to campaign, whether that is through changing public opinion or using the law or lobbying decision makers. Alpha, would you be able to tell us a bit about what's been happening there?
One thing is that, as you're aware, there was a ruling in August 2012 when the High Court of Eldoret like ruled in favor of transgender woman who like was arrested. So for me, it's like Kenya is again, the Kenya is like moving forward around issues around queer people, and the conversation still goes with us organizing online. As you can see, like most of the queer organization are out online. Like they do a lot of social media awareness. Um, if you follow, like there's Galk Plus, like they're out there like creating content. And a lot of other organizations coming out also like using social media to actually like create awareness around queer people. Another thing is about the repeal 162. Despite taking long years, is that the NIGO Act, they are still fighting around it. That we have a case hearing on next month, which is February, the repeal 162, meaning that on the legal term we are still fighting. On social media, like changing the way people see the queer people, is that we are out there like creating content around that. And you can see like we have different organizations coming together as a social media like communication and creating content around like what happening in Kenya, meaning like we are pulling our resources and partnership. Like let's talk about like how people view the queer people in the community, like in Kenya. Let's talk about how masculine presenting people get like attacked around in the streets of Nairobi, and also like when they use like a pads. Let's talk about menstrual health of the masculine and also like intersex person. As you can see, Jinsi Yangu came up with intersex pads, like the pads we are like innerwear. Like we are moving like on the fashion, we have like gender neutral clothing coming up. We have different like creatives creating. We have drag shows happening in Kenya, like out and like out. We have queer shows happening in Kenya. We already have few planned for the next month during Valentine. So for us is that every queer person is using like their own talent and their own like accessibility to actually like create spaces for the queer people. The legal organization, they are using their legal part to actually like push the laws. Uh, us as because we do a lot of fashion shows and also like drag shows, that we create that and invite the public to come and see that. You see, we are just being us, like we are spreading joy, and you know, joy is resistance for the queer people. So for us is each person in Kenya is creating using their talent. We have sports. Last year we created a queer tournament where like different queer players came to play together. So for us is looking at all the aspects of human being. Is it talent? Is it sports? Is it creative art? It is legal. Are you educated? Are you like and you said like for Nadaria, like we did like economic empowerment, is that we also realize that the queer people need to be economically empowered. Like we need to put money back to the community. We have other organizations in Kenya doing like credit financing. We have queer people doing agriculture. So it's like the queer community back in Kenya is like they are using everything to you like to actually like support the queer community. So for me is that I acknowledge and also appreciate our community for actually like working together in their respective strengths, and also like there's a lot of partnership in Kenya. Is that for us, for example, we have a queer shelter. Is that we have a referral system where like the shelter, but there's organization which has like trained paralegals who can actually do like a fact finding of a case and support. We have organization who can support like the cases like Uber, where the cases can like you can pick this person from point A to point B to come to our shelter. So for us, it's like we understand that we need each other, so we work together. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's an amazing, just array of activities and things that are going on. Kim, it would be great to hear a bit from you about things that are going on in Nigeria.
Right. Okay. And what do you mean the question you asked, the previous question you just asked them?
Yeah, just about the kind of things that civil society are doing to fight back and assert your rights.
Okay. I mean, there is a lot of fight back happening in Lagos State, which is very, very encouraging, because I left my state because it was not safe enough for me. And I knew Lagos was a great place. But I didn't realize it was as empowering as it was until I moved. And I saw a lot of people who were daring to be themselves, because in my time, people were looking at me like a casted demon, like people wouldn't want to associate with me. But coming to Lagos, I saw people who lived lives more than I did and were happy and existing like normal people. And it gave me so much courage to continue loving myself and being myself. So that being said, there are a lot of people out here in Lagos who are doing the work personally as a community, you know, and that is a very important thing. So there is a lot of like, not a lot of, but there is some sort of support in the community because people are now, collectively being proud of who they are. And so there is a lot of helping each other. There is a lot of queer events that, on the ground, queer events that are held. There was a drag ballroom show a couple of months ago. There are NGOs who hold events for queer people to just come and be around. There's spaces there's queer library that people can just come and, just be there and exist. So yeah, people are actively doing things to make a difference and change out here, and that's a good thing.
Okay, thank you. That's really good to know. And I will also, before we end, I'll be coming back round to ask everybody, particularly what it is that people outside their countries can do to support and to show solidarity. But Friedel has very gamely offered to help respond to a rather chunky question from Numair, which is in chat, which we shouldn't shrink from at all, I'm sure. Saying appreciate it may be slightly controversial. Do the speakers feel that trying to find harmony between Abrahamic religions and the LGBTQ plus community will continue to be a challenge, given clear textual condemnations of same-sex relation in religious text? Or might we be condemned to selective cherry-picking bits of the text that we like and agree with? So that's possibly one of the most chunky questions that I've ever seen in a chat box in one of these events. So Friedel is going to answer it definitively for us.
Yeah. So thanks so much for asking that question, because it's really one of the burning questions that we have to face as the LGBT community. As part of this colonial mindset and imprinting, part of what we've inherited is Abrahamic faith, whether it's Islam, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Judaism, and the three Abrahamic faiths that really conveyed a very harmful message about sexual orientation, sexuality, and the love of God. I speak as a born-again Christian who's also gay, HIV positive, and coming from Africa. And we've been doing quite a lot of work with churches, church leaders, but also broadly on the theme of decolonizing Christianity. So I would like to go back a little bit in history. About 500 years ago, with the start of the colonial project, you have Dum Veritas, or the doctrine of discovery, where the Pope tells the King of Portugal to go out to convert all the heathens and to take them as slaves or make them slaves, but also to take whatever wealth that they could find. It's important to note that the Pope is speaking to a king, and they are starting a colonial project. and how Christianity has since been used in ongoing colonization, subjugation, and slavery of people across the world, specifically also LGBT people. And so we've been speaking to the Lutheran Church in particular, but also other denominations. And we've seen the church really move from this, what we call clopper texting, using specific verses from the Bible to clopper as a weapon LGBT people, to a more contextual interpretation of the Bible, and to answer questions really around the body of Christ and the role of the church. Our new bishop of the Evangelical Church, which we've been working with, very progressive man, has really raised an important question, and he said, during apartheid, the role of the church was to fight injustice. Where is the voice of the church to fight injustice against LGBT people? And so we can see that there is slowly a change. I also work with Interconnected Justice, ICJ, which is an American US-based organization under Bishop Tolton. And they are trying to bring together African and diaspora voices, so African American, African and diaspora voices, to really work on the question of new spirituality, new Christian thought on LGBT rights, and working with stakeholders in our communities, both in the US and both in Africa, and is establishing an elders council of religious leaders who can speak where we can't speak, whose messages will be received where ours as LGBT people will not be received. But it is really one of the most important questions, because I think there are three things happening: the laws that need to be removed, the colonial laws that need to be removed, but also a colonial set of morality that has now been weaponized. We can see very clearly in the US, current US administration's Project 2025, that they are implementing, attacking women's rights, attacking LGBT rights and sexuality and gender in general. But we also need to talk about the economic and geopolitical influence, starting from Dum Veritas and the doctrine of discovery, and the continued extraction of wealth from Africa, that is propagated first and foremost by creating, as Omar was saying, these culture wars: men against women, LGBT against straight, young people against old people. And while these culture wars are raging, the extraction of resources continues silently. And I think we also need to sort of find partnerships, unusual allies, and start talking beyond the LGBT question. We need to start talking about wars, about poverty, about regime change. We need to be able to find our voices to speak for Palestine. We need to be able to be seen that we are actually part of a new Africa, whether it is in the diaspora, whether it is within Africa, that is not myopic about my rights as an LGBT person only, but that can really see ourselves and locate ourselves in a geopolitical reality that we are not the only, but one of the most important groups that are being targeted at the moment by far right-wing forces to implement their moral view of the world, that is a man and a woman and a white man on top, regulating all the resources in the world. And so I hope that that answer gives gives a bit of more clarity about what needs to be done, what's happening, and what needs to be done.
There's plenty to think about there, certainly. I think we've had a question from Nova, So I'd like to, there's a new something in there, but I think if we bring Alpha back and ask, social media has been mentioned a few times. How do speakers feel that social media can be mobilized to promote human rights support and solidarity? So if we start, and I think we're going to be moving into fairly brief answers, but it would be really great to hear from Alpha on this question.
Thank you so much. You ask about using social media to promote human rights.
Yes.
It's more of like for example, here in Kenya, our organization is the most followed organization in Kenya on social media. It's like creating content around like human rights, and also like one thing I always say is that the Kenyans, like, they sexualize us, the queer people. It's more educating them, saying that the queer people are more than being like a sexual being. Because they always ask, how do you have sex? This kind of thing. It's showing that queer people are actually like doctors, queer people are engineers, queer people are lawyers. So it's also like creating content around like positive impact of the queer people. Maybe showcasing like a queer person who is a pilot, and also like a lot of queer organizations go live on TikTok. You see, TikTok, there's a different kind of audience. It's also like using also like a TikTok live, talking about human rights, what's happening around queer people, and also what's happening around Kenya, because the politics of Kenya also affect us as the queer people. Like you see right now, we have queering the ballot, meaning that as queer people, we are organizing around the upcoming election. Meaning what? We are calling out queer people who want to run or vie to be part of the government. Like there is the support system which can actually support you to vie, even if you want to be the president. Like we are organizing around like what's happening in Kenya. So it's like our social media is also like go vote, go get your votes right. Like it's more of making sure that our Kenyan people are well equipped of what's happening around, because what's happening around also like affects them as queer people. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. That's really good, and I appreciate Omar, that you need to leave quite soon. So I was hoping that you could share with us some thoughts on things that people outside of Namibia can do to show solidarity, to be, literally helpful. And if you would be good enough to share a couple of resources, things that we could watch or read or listen to, and you could always do that in chat if you wanted, because I appreciate you have to head off soon.
Yes, no problem. So yeah, I shared some of the organizations and handles there, and some more information on Fidel's case and a podcast that we developed. I'll also share some work that's being done at the Global LGBTQ Rights Commission, which Friedel is one of the lead commissioners on, and they put out some really great insights and research papers as well. But I think first and foremost, what folks can do to support the community, especially from abroad, especially based in countries like the EU, the UK, and also the US. I think first it is definitely to show up that in a way that respects local leadership, right? I think a lot of people are conscious that, we need to be forming our own campaigns and leading it, but we do appreciate support from abroad, but it doesn't mean like speaking for us. It means amplifying our voices, funding our priorities, and really standing with us when there's backlash, right? Supporting African queer-led organizations directly, rather than like intermediaries that dilute or reframe our work, right? Most importantly, I think this one's also very important, is to use your voices in those countries, especially in political, diplomatic, and institutional spaces, to push your governments to uphold human rights consistently, including in foreign policy and developmental or quote unquote reparational aid, right? And paying attention beyond like moments of crisis, especially only paying attention when anti-LGBTQ bills are being discussed or passed, right? But I think I'll just go back to the point that I've made about using your voices in those countries, especially in the ministries of foreign affairs. A lot of time, those funds they only go to anchor organizations in Africa that are well established, already well funded. They don't go to grassroots organizations like ours at Equal Namibia or like Alpha's at Natharia, Kenya. A lot of queer organizations in Africa are youth-led and are not registered, but they do impactful work. In fact, they are able to do innovative campaigns that are done in a different way and that reaches our societies in a different way. Remember that the African population, I think, is almost 70% young people. So the type of campaignings we do, the type of way we connect with the society, it really makes a dent. And it's unfortunate that many of these the funding that's being given or framed by international governments are unreachable for us. Either if people open up these applications and they see the way these questions are formed, the documents that are required, I mean, it's insane. And finding fiscal hosts in our civil society spaces are incredibly hard. So I think that helping us advocate that, one, the government needs to continue funding our organizations in Africa, and two, that this funding is unrestricted and that we are the ones that are allowed to frame the type of campaigning. They aren't supposed to tell us what they are looking for. I do think the funding that goes to workshops, trainings, conferences are all great. I'm not saying that that's not important, but how many more conferences do we need to attend? Like, how many more trainings and workshops that are already given to either queer people that know the work need to be done? A lot of grassroots organizations are seeing that different types of events and programming like that have been mentioned, ballroom, drag, different economic empowerment events, shelter organizations that are, we keep on hearing that they are going to close down. Like, these different events and program and community building events are so important. It can't just always be a protest or a conference that needs to be funded or a meeting that needs to be funded where the same discussions are being discussed. Sometimes we deserve queer joy. We deserve ballroom and voguing events where young queer people can come and just be themselves and express their gender identity and celebrate queer culture, queer dance, queer music. Like, we deserve events where we can sing, dance, party. It doesn't always just have to be these serious crisis-driven type of events that only speak and serve to a very small part of our community or stakeholders that we are trying to target. So I do think that the most impactful advocacy is to speak to the governments that side and, supporting and continue to supporting grassroots organizations directly.
Thank you very much. And finally, do you have some resources to share to give us a sense of things we can read, watch, listen to understand LGBT life in Africa better?
Yes, so I've reshaped the link. I wasn't able to get Kim's link as well, but they are welcome to also post it as well. These are organizations that myself, Friedel, and Alpha represent, as well as a podcast and some more information on Friedel's cases. I think following these organizations, keeping up to date with their work, sharing their work is super, super important as well.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. So I'd like to come to Kim and ask Kim, any thoughts that you have on things that people outside Nigeria can do to support and show solidarity?
I mean, sure, especially for the trans community in Nigeria, because we barely have any support systems or people to listen to us. And so yes, we need a lot of support in terms of financial help, or like with our HRTs or with consultations, because a lot of times we do all this by ourselves. We medicate ourselves. We just listen to body and go with it, and a lot of times it's very scary. So we need like just a lot of support in that way. There are a lot of girls who are homeless, and it causes a lot of bad things to happen, really, really bad things. So we need help with like just funding for shelter, for feeding, for just keeping our mental state right, honestly.
Thank you.
Because I feel like the rest of the community already have community that is working for them, but the trans community is so marginalized in the community that we barely have people to support or speak for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And are there any resources, things that we could read, watch, look at, listen to that you'd like to share as well, that we can share with the notes for this event?
Yeah. My friend is working on a queer archive, African queer archive, currently, and I feel like it's an amazing thing to do right now, because it helps like us to delve into our history and create our own narratives the way we want them to be. So yes, I could share their Substack. I think there's also a podcast that will be coming up soon. I think it's already up. I'm not sure, but yeah, I have that.
Thank you. That would be brilliant. It'd be really good to get a link to that, so people can have a look at it. Alpha, I'm going to come to you and ask again the same question of what people can do, people in Wales, people anywhere in the world to support.
I think it's more of the way, like Omar says, like sharing like the right resources the queer people they can actually access. And another thing is also like, for me, I always call for partnership, like doing the cross-border like partnership together, like what are your areas you're working on, your thematic areas, so that we can join forces together and also like advance and also like talk about the queer people in different continents. Because I realized that each country like they experience the same they have the same experiences but in different contexts. The Namibian people have same experience as Kenyan people, but it's because they're in different countries. But also it's also realizing that what I need also, then if I want to be economically empowered, a queer person in Namibia also wants to be economically empowered. So for me it's also like sharing the resources and also like working together as community. I think with that together we can go far. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And do you have any resources you'd like to share with us that we can put in the chat or send to people after the event?
Yes, I have few. We have my organization was featured at the Gates Social Enterprise Handbook, so I can share the link with you. And also, it's more of any organization willing to start work around like moving away from donor independent funding. Is more of how can an organization like move into social enterprise to support the organization. So we have that as an organization. And I think, I don't know if Omar mentioned it, we have an ongoing project on drug and work beyond borders. It's a cross-border project and be able to work together. So it's more of also sharing like some of the articles has been done. And also I can share about like the cases I mentioned about the Kenya Human Rights Commission. They did like a report they did with Jinsi Yangu. So those are the things like you can actually like resources you can actually see and also see how like what's happening in Kenya and the way forward as community. Yeah, I can share that on the link on the chat.
Brilliant.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. That would be great. And Friedel, I'll ask you just because we are nearly out of time, but I would just ask if you've got some resources that you would like to share with us as well.
About that. Yeah, and I will share the resources with the lovely organizer for this meeting, who's been keeping us on our toes and prepared. Just as a referral, I think I want to focus people's attention on the Global Commission on LGBT Rights, which is really being held at the moment by Kaleidoscope Trust in London, and that there is a lot of work going on. It's very time limited, 2 years, and it wants to answer the three questions. Where did we come from? Where are we now? And what are we going to do, especially because of the situation, the global situation which we find ourselves in? There's a lot of ways to contribute and a lot of consultations happening, including in the UK and in the global north. And so that's one I will share on how one can get involved. The other thing is that I'm doing a documentary, which is going to be aired hopefully sometime this year with two other activists on litigation, on our litigation journeys. I will also share a link to that. And the great work that Interconnected Justice and the Sankofa movement are doing to address the question of religion and a true African spirituality within the context of Christianity at the moment. And then there is one movie that sort of speaks to that. Its title is 1946, and it really speaks about religion and how LGBT have sort of are being misused by the current Christianity. There are a lot more materials that I will share as you need, but I wanted to say, finally, sorry, that conversation is really important, and I'm so happy that we're having this meeting. But we also need to work on intersection, not just with the LGBT issue, but with the adjacent other issues that require decolonization, so that we can form true partnerships. And that the diaspora movement, especially in the Wales, can really be a good conversational partner, so that we are able to, because LGBT rights are not just at risk here in Africa, but we see transgender rights being at risk in the UK. We see gay marriage being at risk in the US. And so it is time that we work together, that we speak again and refresh our global talk and social agreement on how we can work together. And I think the Global Commission is trying to do just that. Over.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, I've got maybe 30 seconds to sum up before we do a final poll, which is very important. So I will say, first of all, thank you so much to all of our speakers and participants for coming along for this conversation. This is a piece of work that Hub Cymru Africa will be continuing. We are looking to support groups in Wales who have partners in Africa to help them to make their work more inclusive of LGBT plus people. We're also looking to work with LGBT plus led organisations in Wales who would like to work in solidarity with siblings in Africa as well. So if you are interested in doing more on this, then please don't just go away. Send us an email, get in touch. We'd be really keen to talk to you about things that we can do together and things that we can help with. But we can finish the meeting and say good evening.